What's up, everybody? My name is Valentin. I'm going to be walking you through our Active Directory setup using VirtualBox. Basically, in this setup, the purpose for this, for me, I'm creating this for the purpose of pen testing, having a lab so I can use a Windows environment and an Active Directory environment, which is good for not just learning Active Directory, but also for obviously learning about the vulnerabilities, learning about mitigations, and anything. Just a lab, just a sandbox for me to make a mess in mine. So I'll be walking you through that. And before we start, I want to let's look at kind of what we're going to be getting into and how to go about that. So basically, I'm going to be taking notes down here, so as we go, kind of get a flow for what's going on and keeping track, which is extremely important because I will get lost if I do not. And basically what we're going to be walking through today in this walkthrough, this tutorial, is first we're just starting with our VirtualBox setup. Then we'll set up Windows Server, and we'll be doing Windows Server 2022, not that year, not yet. Then after that, once we set up our Windows Server, we can set up our Active Directory domain services and our certificate authority. We'll set up a service, set up our users, and we'll set up another machine. So basically, we'll have a nice environment to be able to experiment with. I'm going to set up 2 Windows 10 machines eventually, but this video I'm only going to be showing you how to set up 1. The only reason I'm going to have 2, so I can have 1 user with very low level privileges and 1 user that might be a domain admin, just so I can have some different looks in the environment. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so to start, we're going to make this really simple. Let's go ahead and start our Windows Server. Come up to New. Now, Windows Server 2022, it doesn't really have any presets for it, so just 2019 will work. And I'm going to call this WinServe 2022. Makes it really simple. We get back over here. Now this just really, from what I've noticed, will just change your presets in the next screen, so it's not too important, but just make sure you know to go and change those if you pick an earlier version. Okay, so let's go back. I recommend whatever the recommended sizes can work for you, but at least 2 gigs is good. I believe so for RAM. I can handle it because I have 16 gigs of RAM on this computer, but whatever works for you. 50 gigs. Since this, I'll show you. Go ahead and create virtual hard disk now. I'm going to pick VDI. VDI is your virtual disk or VirtualBox disk image. VHD, I think it has to do with Windows. If you ever need to export this to Windows, then you have that. VMDK, I believe, is VMware's. If you want to export this to VMware, which will probably be more common than VHD, but for now, I'm not leaving VirtualBox, so I'm just going to hit continue. And for physical hard disk, I recommend just going with dynamically allocated. This way, if you want to leave 50 gigs of hard drive space for your computer, which you may end up using on your virtual machine, you'll be able to expand to that. But if you don't use it, it's not going to take away from your host machine, which is important because you don't want to take up 50 gigs on 3 different machines right away if you don't have it. But if you might add to that, it's better to have a little bit more and then use dynamically allocated, in my opinion, because you never know what could happen. I mean, I've had a few issues where maybe just a weird something goes wrong because these are test environments, and then all of a sudden you added 20 gigs of something to your computer, and if you don't have enough space, it may not be able to handle it. You run into a bunch of issues. So dynamically allocated, I wouldn't allocate more than you can possibly have, but it's not going to hurt if I leave this at 50 right now, even though I don't have 50 gigs to give at the current moment, or I don't want to give 50 gigs away, but I don't have to. It's dynamically allocated, so it will only use what I'm currently using on that box. Now, before you hit start, come in here. Let's start with our system. Just unclick the floppy. We're never going to use that. processor, I at least would say do 2. I'm going to do 2. I could probably go a little bit higher, but for the sake of keeping resources. I don't need more than that. I'll be fine. Let's skip over display, skip over storage for now, audio, network. This is what's important. So the way we're going to set this up, we need all of these computers to talk to each other. Now, there are ways to do that other than the way I'm going to do it. Bridge Adapter will put your VirtualBox on your home network or your local network, wherever you are. Personally, I don't like to have my virtual machines showing up so anybody can see them. These are test environments, and I want to be able to experiment and make things vulnerable. It's not safe to make something vulnerable that is accessible by anything else. So I don't want that. Even though I would be able to create other machines that see it. For this, I'm going to use something called NAT Network. I haven't seen too many people using this online. It could be because it was added. It's not as old. Maybe it's a newer feature and that's why. But personally for me, this is what's worked. So I'm just going with that. And okay, so we'll notice here, I'm going to come back. So I'm selecting NAT Network. Now I have a network down here called Network Zero. Network Zero is a network that I created that I'm not going to be using for this. I also have one called TestNet. I'm going to create a new one and show you how you would go about that now. So I don't think I have anything else in here yet. You can ignore all the rest of this. So I'm going to hit OK. We're going to come up to Tools, go to Preferences. Let's go into our network. Now here, I'm actually going to get rid of this. I don't need this TestNet. I'm going to keep Network Zero. It's not active right now. I'm not going to need that, but let's create a new network so you can see what it looks like. So we got a new NAT network. I'm going to hit Edit. Let's call this AD Lab. So your range, I mean, this is, as long as it's within the private range. Sometimes I just like to have numbers that are easier to type. I like typing 10 tens. So I'm going to, well, 2 tens, but 10 10. I'm going to leave this at 10.10.2 and then go from there. Or you know what? I feel like I don't want to type the number the number 7 over and over. Let's stick with 2. Okay, so then now, and we have our CIDR at 24. So we can tell that we're going to have the 0 right here is going to be our host. And here's our network number. So you can leave everything else the same. Supports IPv6. For what we're going to use and do, everything's going to happen within this environment. Besides the DHCP, which will have automatically handing out those IP addresses within the network. It makes it a little bit easier. So go ahead and hit OK here. Now make sure that it's active. It'll just tell you this NAT network with name. Now let's go back into our settings. Let's go to our network. Now down here, it's the Network Zero. Let's do AD Lab. And hit OK. And that should be it for this section of it. We'll come back to this when we have to do another host machine. But let's go ahead and get started on this. So go ahead and hit Start here. Now it's off to the side. So okay, here is where we're going to need what we downloaded. If you downloaded the proper ISO, these naming conventions are all a little bit odd, but let me add these in. A lot of these you can see they're not there anymore. It's just because I renamed them. Hopefully I renamed the right ones, because the naming conventions that they had are hard to understand. So you might need to do this to help yourself out as well. So we're going with Windows Server 2022. Once you have that, go ahead and hit choose, and you can hit start. This will start just like you're booting a computer that's installing Windows for the first time. Okay, now here we're just going to go through our normal setup. There's only a few things that we might do a little bit different. Let's go ahead and hit next, hit install now. And go ahead and let this install. Okay. Now I want to select desktop experience for myself. If you want to do everything slightly different, that's up to you. I just recommend this. This will be the most standard experience you'll probably see in an enterprise environment. So let's go next. Go ahead, accept. Now for the installation type, just do custom. We're gonna go here. I'm just gonna split this up so that the system is separate from the rest of the hard drive. I like to have partitions when I can. Okay, and go ahead and let this install. We'll meet you back when we're done. Okay, so here we are. Now I'm gonna type. Eventually what we're gonna do for this setup is we're gonna use really weak passwords, but for now I don't have the ability to use weak passwords because this comes set up default using complex passwords. So I'm just gonna type whatever password and I'll change it later. So go ahead and enter whatever password passes the qualifications, and then that way you can just go from here. We'll change everything later. I'll add it to the steps, you'll see. Finish. Now that we're here, we can just log in. And if you're on a virtual machine, sometimes you may not know what keys. Like for me, Control-Alt-Delete is not going to work. So you can come up here. I believe there is a, where is that thing? There's usually, I'm not crazy. Where do I see it? Oh, here. Yeah, you can just do an insert, Control-Alt-Delete if you can't figure out these, but for me, I believe it's, let's see, hold on, I gotta look at it. I believe it's Command, Function, and Delete. Yes. So go ahead and enter your password. Okay, go ahead and hit yes. You get our server manager. You're gonna be in here a lot, so get comfortable with this. Well, first thing I actually want to do, it's not going to be with server manager. Let's go ahead and move this for a second. As you can tell, I don't have the ability to stretch out my screen. It seems basic, but trust me, you're going to want this at times, even if you don't need it now. So come up here, go ahead and hit insert guest additions, CD image. And while that's given a second to start, also type in PC display. Yeah, well, let's do this as the PC name. So I want to change my name. Now, the naming conventions that you choose, all this is completely up to you. I'm just going to have fun and choose something that I'll remember that works for me. So I'm going to rename this PC, and let's actually start taking notes over here. So let's say, okay. So machine 1, or let's actually call it what it is. I don't know if I call it 2022, but either way. let me first figure out what I want to call this. Let's say, okay. Oh, you know, first thing we need to do, let's go back here. I want to add a few things to these notes real quick. I want to just add, let's call it machine 1, or okay, we'll just start writing and then we'll figure out stuff as we go. So host 1, and let's do it like this. VBox name is when, oh, I called it WinSer 2022. Oh well, that's what it's gonna be. And actually, before I come here, let's do some stuff about the network. So our network, we already said, is preferences. This is our network address. Our network range. And we'll fill things in as we're going for now. So within the network, let's actually make this bigger so we know it's part of it. There's range. Okay. So let's leave that. We'll just fill in pieces as we're going. Whatever data. I'm sure I always go back and I'll find some other things I want to add, but as long as we start collecting it, it'll make it easier, even if we might forget something, go back. So our server, I want to look here into our, well, first let's name it. So I'm going to go with, for those anime fans out there, Cowboy Bebop is one of my favorites. So I'm going to name, let's name this one our PC. I'm gonna name this Hammerhead for our domain controller for Jet Ship. Let's go ahead and do so we know it's a domain controller. And before you do restart, go ahead and restart later. Come into here. We're going to install these VirtualBox guest editions so we can be a real computer. So go ahead. Next, or install. I'll go ahead and reboot everything so we can have our display name, our PC name changed, and have our VirtualBox set up. Our guest editions installed. So I'll see you when we come back. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back in. Use your password. Okay, so as this is loading back up, that server manager start back up, it's fine. I'm also going to go into, let's run command prompt. Just want to get my information for my oh my goodness, looks so slow. Anyway, DNS servers 19. Okay, this will change. Right now this is showing this, but this will adjust once we set up our domain services. Okay, so let's add in our, for here under the host, we just need this IP address. Let's see, 10.10.2.4. Let's also put our, IPv6 as well. Actually, since I'm going to do it in this, because we will eventually use this for IPv6 attack. We won't necessarily need to know it, but it's good to list all these. You especially in a test environment, why not? So list this. 1DD 444D 57B 6. Okay, so that look about right. 847 B57B. Okay, so let's leave that. We can leave this up for now. I'll come back to it. Okay, so now we pretty much have our Windows server set up as we need for the gist. By the way, I'm colorblind, so if I pick a crazy color, ignore it. I can't see the difference between a lot of these, so too bad for you. Okay, for now, information wise, that's the main thing we're going to need. I'm going to start installing our services. So if you come up here, oh, actually, first, we need, currently, I don't want to have these complicated passwords. I want to change these up. So actually, we're not going to come here. I don't believe, yeah, I believe we're going to come, let's come down to our, where is it? Well, I just realized, so, okay, let's set this up first, actually. We can change the passwords after. We're going to need one more password in here, but it's okay. It's not a big deal. So read all this if it's your first time here. We're going to go with the role-based. We're not doing remote for this. Just go ahead and hit next. This is what we need, Hammerhead. The first thing I'm going to do, we're going to need both Active Directory certificate services and domain services, but for the sake of installation, these two could trip each other up. So I would install your domain services first, then install your certificates on this. So go ahead and hit add features. Go ahead and hit next. Yeah, let's go ahead and next. Let's go ahead next. You see group policy management here, so eventually that's what I'm going to need. Wait till this is installed, and go ahead, hit restart if needed. And this is just going to install anything you need for these domain services. So once it's done, we'll pick up and then set up with our manager. Okay, so now you'll see configuration required, installation succeeded. So we can go ahead and close this. Now up here, we need to click on promote this server to a domain controller. Now this is where the steps, so basically we're naming our why is my brain drawing a blank? We're naming our force. Oh, it's right there. What am I even saying? Basically, what you want to name this is up to you. I'm going to be sticking with a similar environment. So this is going to be Bebop. And you have to use an extension. A lot of times I'll see .local, sometimes .com. This is just a test environment for me, and I just like .net. So that's what I'm going to stick with. And then there's different reasons. You can research why you might pick one or the other, but for now, it's test environment. This will work perfectly fine for me. Here, ignore all this. Just enter a password. You're going to need to enter something still complex enough. So use the same password or whatever. I honestly, this one I have not run into or needed to deal with later, so it's not a huge big deal. So just go ahead, hit next. The name should pop up here that you've created, just so you can confirm everything's working. There you go. Go ahead, hit next once you see it. Hit next. Hit next. Now any prerequisites needed will be installed here. So go ahead and click install, and it should reset. So basically after you hit install, skip this, and then I'll meet you back in after it resets. Okay. Once everything's done installing, you should get the reset prompt, and you come back in, and this is what you should see. This is how you know everything's working. You see your domain, you see your user. This is how, when you're signing into Active Directory, things will look. So this means we're on the right path. So go ahead and enter your password. Let's get back in. Now, the next step, we need our certificate authority installed. Basically, having our certificate authority, since this domain will kind of be the head of everything, all of our network traffic, anything going through and forth. This will allow us to sign and confirm identities within our network and coming in and out of our network. Let's go to manage. We're going to go back to add roles and features. Same thing, role based. Go ahead, hit next for this. Now click on Active Directory, certificate services, add features. Hit next. Let's hit next again. Go hit next, next. Restart if needed, and go ahead and install. And actually, one thing I do want to add in here, I would like to have, we're gonna set up a, well, we'll do it after. This one's set up a share. Do an SMB share. Is 8. All right. Now, once this is finished installing, skip this and come back and we'll set it up through our manager. Okay, we'll go ahead and hit close. And again, you'll see our notifications showing us we need to configure our certificate authority services. Similar situation. So go ahead and this is all good. Hit next. Click on certificate authority. Hit next, enterprise CA, hit next, root CA, hit next, create a new private key, next, leave this all the same, just hit next, leave this the same, and here you can do expiration, 999 years, doesn't matter, just enough for you to do whatever you need in this lab. Just go ahead and hit next again, and now we are going to configure it. So once this is done, hit close. I don't believe I need to reset for this. I could be wrong, but I believe that should be good enough. So let's go ahead and scratch this off. Now what I'm gonna look again, we want to, what am I doing? Here, okay. Let's pull up our information now. IP config. I keep doing it. Okay. So now you can see things look slightly different. We have our DNS servers, which are coming back to our loopback. Everything else still looks pretty similar, but and also, if I didn't point this out earlier, you can see we have our DHCP server, similar to what we saw in this picture. This is basically what we're doing down here. So we see we have a similar setup. Our NAT will probably be listed as our router, our gateway, our default gateway. These are all virtualized within your host machine, and then hits the virtual interface. Okay. From here, let's put that to the side. So now what I want to do is I'm going to set up I want to set up users and set up our groups. So we're kind of going to do that together, even though they're listed as separate things. But let's come in here under tools. If you notice, once you set something up, you'll see more options here. So first thing I want to do, actually, before I forget, these passwords are kind of a pain. For this test environment, we want to make them weak because it's a hacking lab that I basically am emulating a misconfigurations and vulnerabilities, and just weak passwords are part of that. So I'm going to come down here and make sure our whole entire domain, once you start making changes, this is a place to do it. Your group policy, come in here. We're going to go into computer configuration, policies, software settings, Windows settings, security settings, and account policies. Our password policy, we're going to change all of this. Maximum password age, let's just do 999, why not? Length, just for sake of, I don't know what I may end up doing later, let's just make this 3 just in case. You know, this is obviously the opposite of everything you would do in a real environment, but for this is what I want as a hacker, to emulate people who made mistakes or just had terrible configuration. So I'm going to take off this requirement for complexity. This is what we need in order to change our password. We don't need to worry about going back and changing any of the passwords except our administrator. That one I do want to change, but what we set up in our domain, those you can leave. So let's keep this not fine. Okay, perfect. Now the other thing we're going to need also while we're in here is we need, outside of our account policies, we need our local policies. Here we have security options. This we need to define for the sake of making sure that there are certain hacks, especially like a IPv6 takeover attack, which is one I've spent a lot of time learning and looking into. We're going to need to make sure that our signing in our network is turned off. We don't need to turn off, actually. We can leave it on. I'm going to have it so it's not required, so that basically you do not need to require signature from anybody on the network. So that way, even though you can still sign things, this is a vulnerability if this is off. I believe the client, I'm going to turn both off just in case. So just disable requiring signing. So signing will still be there, but it's not required. By not requiring signing, it leaves an opening, a vulnerability for us to do multiple attacks. So leave that. Let's define those and disable them. In your normal environment, if you're a sysadmin, do not do that. Okay, so that's all we're going to need from here. Let's leave that as is. Okay. We can come down here. Let's do a GP update. The GP update will allow our group policy, instead of having to reset, we can just have this updated now because I want to be able to change these passwords. So first thing we're going to do is let's change the password to our administrator. So let me see what's okay. So net user administrator. We're just going to add a star like this so I can type my password in here, but my password is going to be password1, something very simple that can be hacked, that is going to show up in a RockU list or anybody else's password list. So that's good. Password set. Let's come back here. Now under our tools, we're going to come first to our Active Directory users and computers. Now here, let's click on. So first then, we'll notice when you come through here, you'll notice that you have your built-in. These should not be used. These groups are really, because they're built in, they're really used to be set to sit here, and they're already assigned. I wouldn't recommend adding users to this administrators. We're going to add them to domain admins as opposed to any of these built-ins. So I wouldn't touch any of those. But for the sake, if you want to make something vulnerable, it's great. Of course, add somebody as an administrator, perfect, because that's an area that would cause problems in the future, most likely. And you see our domain computer, it's listed as our domain controller, which will be the only one in here that we have like this. Now here, there's a bunch of stuff in this group. I want to make this cleaner and just make it into I just want this to just be users. So right click on your bebop.net or whatever you named yours, and go ahead and do a new organizational unit, actually, not a group, and call this groups. So we're going to take all these groups, these security groups right here, we need, but we do not need them to be in the same folder. So go ahead and move all these. We'll deal with these later. Okay. Now here's a guest account. It's usually safer to leave this off. I'm going to enable it because it is safer to leave it off, and this is a hacking lab, so why not? It gives me time to experiment, try different things out with that account. You never know what you can do. So, you know, I'm just trying to make it a little bit vulnerable. It doesn't have to be so crazy. Now, first thing I'm going to do, let's start off with this service. I want to add a service. And okay, so let's see. I'm going to copy. We're going to take this, which would not be a good idea normally to do, is copy your administrator. Because now this means whoever I'm about to create has the same privileges and everything as our administrator. And that is not, this is an active domain administrator. So that's over everything. And plus the computer that is our domain controller. Now, if I add this to a service, I'm just going to, for the sake of this service, let's call this, I'm going to call this, what should we call it? Let's call it, okay, for this, let's just say, we'll just name it something we know. It would be Cowboy Service. We'll know what it means. Okay, and let's do the login. No, this is the issue too. It has its own login. But we're copying it, so that's what's going to happen. Now for this, let me actually come here. I did not make a note. I'll add this in separate users. Administrator. And I'm going to do it just like this. Name, passes, password 1. Yeah. Okay. We'll figure out the rest. But for the service, let's see. Cowboy service. We're going to do, because I want to have the others with the other passwords, so we're going to do password 4 for this one. Leave it slightly out of the way. Okay, and I'll add later each user's actual groups and all that, but for now, not as particular about that. I just need to make sure, let's see, this is the most. Domain admin. Yes. Domain admin. Yes. Okay. So delete this as it is. So this is password 4. Expires. Okay. Now this, I'm not going to set this up fully at the moment, but this is one of those things, if you're setting up a capture the flag, which I am for myself, so I might as well just do this. I'm going to name this flag, let's make this flag 1. Just name whatever. I don't even know how to generate. I'm so bad at it. I'm like, how can you be bad at generating things like this? Like, I feel like it just looks bad. You know what? None of those special characters. Just, well, I feel like I always use the same. Man, I can't just use something different. Anyway. Okay. We'll say that's it. Whatever naming convention, we'll figure it out later. Okay, so there's flag 1. So that way I can come in here and if I get information, I can find this flag. Create my own little CTF. Okay, so CB service. Now, in order for this service, I need to make sure this service is actually seen. Right now, it just is a user. It doesn't know it's a service. So let's turn this into a service. Let's just set spam. I always forget. Need to look in here. I believe it's there's S. Yeah, no recommendations are so SPN stands for set principal name. Let's go with this. I might have to look up the syntax for this. I always forget. We're gonna try it. Whatever. We're gonna try it. Let's see if I can do this without. So this I do remember. If we can look to see what's here. I believe it's with a -Q. I'm gonna look up everything. Yeah, here we go. So I just need to add this to this list. Okay. So let's go ahead and hit our S. I believe let's add. Okay, so I think it's, let's do CB service.bebop.net, and let's just pick a picking a port for it that won't get in the way. And let's do, finish it off. I might need to. Okay, let's do bebop service. I was gonna. We'll find out. Let's find out right now. Okay, so that works. So now let's double check. So we should see it somewhere on this list. We don't. Okay, let's figure out what I just did, because I did not. Oh, wait. Never mind. There it is. Yup. Right here. Okay. So that's what we need. This will be something we'll come back to. We can deal with in future when we set up our or we do a few different hacks. And we have a service that has administrative privileges. That is not good on any system. Okay, so for now, let's close that back. Now we just want to create some other users that will be using, that are supposed to be users, and we'll create these. I'm going to create 2. I'm only going to end up creating, oh, well, yeah, no, that's what I'll do. So first name, let's do Spike. I did not know all this time his name was Spiegel. His last name was Spiegel. I've watched that series multiple times. For those of you that the original is, or the Netflix version is your thing. I don't know about that. I'm not vouching for that one. Okay, so their full name. Let's just do Spike. Your naming conventions can be whatever. This is just a test environment, so I'm not going to go too hard at this. So I hit next. I'm going to do for Spike password 2. Password 2. Password never expires. Hit next and finish. So let's add him in right here. Spike password 2. And he is going to be a domain admin as well. And you'll see that we're not adding Jet in. We're going to assume Jet's the administrator. I mean, really, Ed would be the administrator, I guess, but we're just going to assume. So down here where you see member of, I went to properties just in case if you missed it. I'm going to come here and just, well, member of, you can add them here, or you can go into the groups itself, which is where they are. Down here under domain admins, I can come in here, and under members, just go ahead and add Spike either way. It's up to you. And once you do check name, Spike at bebop.net should pop up, and hit apply, add that, and as you see under users, it's the same thing. So now he's a member of domain admins, which is what we want. One user with domain admins, and let's create Faye. Oops. Nice. Create Faye. Valentine. She is not going to be a domain user. She's going to be a regular user, so that way we'll be able to practice privilege escalation as well. So password 3 for her? Yes. Password 3. Okay. Password 3. Admin. Okay. Now you can make as many users as you want. They don't all have to match with the amount of machines that you have. I can only really, based on resources, create 2 virtual machines outside of my attack box and my Active Directory. So 2 host machines will be able to fit for me and then 1 attacker. And if you can handle more, then do that. If you can't, then you can just create one box. I would recommend you need at least to have your server running in at least 1 Windows 10 box, if possible, because it's going to be impossible to do certain attacks without having a separate machine within your network, and also without anything connected to your Active Directory. There's not going to be anything to really communicate back and forth with. So let's leave. This looks good, I believe. We good. So she should just be a member of domain users. Exactly. Perfect. Let's add a share. So let's come down here. Now this is obviously something that we can also, if we're adding shares, we can find vulnerabilities within this as well. I want to add an SMB share. So I'm going to come down here to files and shares and then go into shares. Now let's hit new share. Let's do quick SMB share. Let's do select by volume. If you have a folder that you want to use, that you want to have as a share, maybe it already has things in it, just go ahead and type that custom path down here. I'm creating a new one with nothing in it, so it's not a big deal for me. I'm going to call this bounties. Create it like it's a bounty folder for the gang. Let's hit next. Hit next. Hit next. And create. Okay. So we're going to close that. Now we have that down here. As you can see, if you come here, there's 2 places you'll see it, and 1 we'll actually need to click on. Click on network. And what's going to happen, you'll get this message. As soon as that happens, you'll get a option up here to turn this on. Go ahead and turn this on. You should see these come through. Perfect. So now we're configured for that. We have our share on our network, which we can access. And for the purpose of this activity, or the activities we'll be doing, we'll be able to hack this later. Also, if you want to find it, your share on your network, it's right in here in shares under your C drive. Bounty, same thing. So now we're back in VirtualBox. What we're gonna want to do now, we're gonna create our second machine, and this will be Windows 10. As I told you, Windows 11 is a little bit too resource intensive for this, but if you're using that, then just pick whatever it is that you use. We'll call this Win 10. Well, I'm gonna need 2, so we'll call this Win 10. Win 10. Nah. Doesn't look as good as I want. Anyway. So, or can I do, maybe it'll let me do dots. That would be better. Oh, cool. Personally, like you can use 2 gigs for this. For me, I mean, I should use 2 gigs. Yeah, I'll use 2. I mean, I don't need to use more than 2. I mean, you can. Same deal here. We're just gonna go through. I mean, you can leave this one at 50. I'm just gonna pick 30. I know I'm not gonna ever use 50 on this. Okay. So from here, similar deal. I'm just gonna remove the floppy. Let's add at least 2 to our processor, 2 CPUs. Or yeah. Let's come over here to our network. I don't believe anything else will need double check. Yeah. So our network, drop down, select NAT network and 80 lab, and you're set. So now go ahead and hit start. Put it over there for some reason. Now down here we're going to, let's add our downloads. Let's add our Windows Enterprise 10. Click on that. And now you can hit start. Okay, once we're here, go ahead and hit next and install now. Okay, just go ahead and accept these terms. I'm sure one day somebody will get us. We'll be accepting something we didn't know. Didn't read anything. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on here. Click new. Same deal. Just separating the systems from the primary. And go ahead and install. And meet you back when this is done. All right. So once you come back after everything resets, take a second to install. But you'll be faced with this screen right here. And you can just go through this as you would whatever your region is. Some of these might be a little different how you approach it, but we'll go through it. Whatever your language for keyboard is. I'm just going to skip this. Okay. So here, now I'm not really, I can't get a complete clear answer on, I guess everybody does something different. For me, personally, for the name of this PC, because of how we're setting this up, this won't be relevant based on what I can tell. I could be wrong. But I don't want to name the PC after any of my users, because maybe I'll switch between users, and the whole point of Active Directory is I can log into any computer with any user. So for the sake, I was running into a little bit of confusion by having some of these names line up within the users of the machine. So I'm just going to name this local. You can do whatever you want. And again, like I said, this is just for me. Just so I'm not confused. But if you want to name it after the user you're going to have on this PC, that's fine too. Super memorable password. I am not. I'm just going to, with this machine, password 2, because this is my second machine. And for all these, just so you don't ever forget, I would recommend just having one simple answer. Don't actually answer these, because if for some reason you ever need to use these, which I have not, it'd be better just to know that your answer is the most basic thing possible. Oh, okay, so local won't work. So, let's call this, I'm gonna call it local user. Password 2. Oops. Password 2. Same security questions. Next. Test next. Next. Oops. Well, okay, whatever. If I end up using that, I will not forget. it'll trigger my mind at the last second once I see that I spelled that wrong. Okay. Turn all this off. Ugh, this is gross. Get out of my business. Jeez. Can't even use a computer anymore without giving up everything. Just a local account would be nice. So go ahead, turn all that off and hit accept. Ugh. Alright, Cortana, cool in Halo, don't care about here. No Cortana, not now. Hi. So as I get everything ready, just sit tight. I'll see you on the other side. Okay. So now we're in. Kinda. So go ahead and hit yes for this network, and what we're gonna do first. Yes. So what we're gonna do first, similar to what we did in our other. So we're gonna find our PC name. Since this is Spike's machine, primarily, well, that's the plan. I'll name this after his ship. So Swordfish. It was Swordfish 2 technically, but we don't have to get that technical. And you don't need to add any DC or anything. This is just a name. It's a normal host. Nothing special about this host. Go ahead and hit restart later. Insert guest editions. Might have already been in there. Let's double check. Moving a little slow. Maybe I should have given it a little bit more memory, or processor a little faster. Okay, so I came in here for, oh yeah, here we are. So let's go ahead and install this AMD 64. Yes. And run through this the same way, and we'll just, once done, we'll reboot. Voila. Well, voila this part. Then we have some more. Okay, so let's come back in here. Local user, password 2. I know what I want. Okay. Open our network settings. Just right click down here. Quick way to get to it. Alright. Now here where you see change adapter options, this is what we need. Right click on this. Hit properties. So here, this is where we need to enter in our IP address of our Active Directory, our domain controller. So I know what it is, 10.10.2.4, but let's go back in just in case if you're looking for it, just come here, look under your IPv4 address, copy this, well, if you can, or just type it in. Click on properties, come down here to use the following DNS server address. 10.10 and type in all the dots still. .4 or sorry, .2.4. Okay. And go ahead and close this. That's all you're gonna need. Now, what I'm gonna do, we'll deal with that later. Search for access. It should pop up. Yeah. Not access Hollywood. Access work or school. I'll click here, hit connect. So if this works properly, and if it doesn't, we'll troubleshoot. But if this works properly, everything should just line up based on all the settings we had now. So come down here, select join this device to a local Active Directory domain. Now, when I type in Bebop and hit next, it should pop up. You should see this, where it's asking for our user credentials, and this is where we'll enter. My username is Spike, or this is who's going to be using this computer, and my password is password2. So enter OK, and what should happen is you should get another dialog box that looks similar, same color, asking if you want to be an admin, and we're going to say yes. Okay, so here is enter the account info for the person who'll be using this PC. So we're gonna Spike is the accounts. We're gonna have an administrator. Normally, most of these, this would be somewhat of a tricky situation as well. I wouldn't quite call it a vulnerability because I know there could be situations where you need this, but when there are user accounts that have administrator privileges, that's always an area that you can exploit. Well, anything that has administrator privileges. So the more users that have administrator privileges, the more possibilities there are for issues. So this user having this on this machine is somewhat of a vulnerability in this instance, because this user will not be the administrator for the domain, or they're basically just a user that we're giving privileges as if maybe either someone left this configuration on accident, or maybe someone thought that someone needed these for some reason, and we'll exploit that. So go ahead and click next, do restart now. So now we're back in, and as you can see, for login, we see that we have our domain is active. We're Spike from bebop.net, and we should be able to use our password, password2, log right in. And while I'm at this, let's fix this over here just in case you've been looking at it. Leave these blank. I imagine this is going to be 5, but we'll see. We don't know. Or it might be 6. That's my guess. Let's put 6. Let's guess it. Why not? Okay, and as you notice, because we're signing into the domain, this is treating this computer like we've never signed in before, because as Spike at bebop.net, we have not. So now we are in, and let's pull up our command prompt. And let's see who we are. Let's find out who are we. So we see that we're Spike. Did you notice we're Bebop Spike, not just regular Spike? And as you can see, we have different users on the machine, but this is actually our user. We see our user accounts for the machine versus our user that's in the Active Directory network. So 2 different things, which is why, as you can see, local user down here, I did not want to name this Spike because it gets a little confusing and throws me off. I just want to separate those 2. So I'm gonna do, oh my, all today. Don't ask me why I am doing this like that. Oh, this is so slow. All right, so this is just information, and I mean, as gathering information, I would gather as much as possible. This is just for me. Oh, not you. So we got a 5. This is for me to, as I'm setting this up for my labs, the more you collect, the more data you have to learn from, as opposed to just firing off random attacks and seeing which you can hit, writing everything down so you don't overlap. It's more efficient. And having this data, it makes it easier than trying to go into the computer and look this up in, either using ipconfigs or ipconfigs on Linux. And this is just collect as much data as possible. And I'm saying that to myself because I tend to just like to freestyle, but it's definitely better to have as much information as possible written down. Okay, so A9 F9, and if I made any mistakes on these IP addresses, I'll obviously come back and fix them. So don't judge me. I'll fix it eventually. Okay, so we have two hosts. This is our Active Directory host, and our domain controller, let me state this here. Okay, and let's put directory. Yes. Let's put, what should I put here? I want to have, oh yeah, domain name might be, okay. Alright, cool. So these, I would say, whatever color that is, okay, whatever. So basically now you have an entire Active Directory at your hands to mess around with. I'm going to set up another computer off camera or off of the tutorial, obviously, but you can do whatever you want. You can set up as many users, you can set up as many computers. You don't need to have the actual virtual machines to represent them, but if you want to set them up or set up different users, you can be creative about it. So for me, let's get rid of this for now. For me right now, all we really need, or what I want to see right now, is come here into our, so we have Swordfish, which is our computer we just set up. As you can see, it's on the network. This is showing everything's working. I just want to show that we're all on the same thing. I believe that should be it as far as the setup. What I would recommend doing, when I close that, what I would recommend doing is your Windows server is pretty much going to stay up for most of these attacks. This machine that you have here is going to be the one that, whether you turn it on and off, reboot it, there'll be different ways to attack this and different things. So I would focus here. But, well, shouldn't say I would focus here. I would, you know what? Ignore everything I just said. You just have fun. Do whatever you need. This is my basic setup for how I set up my Active Directory. There are a few other elements that I guess I can point to make sure some of these work, but I'll address some of these attacks work, I should say, but I'll address those in the videos with the attacks. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you were able to follow along. If you have any questions, I'm easy to reach. Yeah, so enjoy.